Hello, friend. Thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend a few minutes with Trouble is My Business by Raymond Chandler. This collection of stories was originally published in 1950, from what I can tell, although I think the stories were published individually elsewhere previous to this. But this particular collection was published in 1950, and this edition that I read was a Vintage Crimes Black Lizard edition, which was came out in 1992. So, Trouble is My Business by Raymond Chandler. I just have so much fun with Raymond Chandler novels. The lingo of the era, the detective work that's done, the sort of the hard-boiled detective work of Philip Marlowe. There's four different stories in this book, and really they don't really go together, other than the fact that they all feature the very famous detective Philip Marlowe. This is the fifth of the Raymond Chandler novels that I've read and chatted here on my channel. I previously read The Big Sleep, Farewell, My Lovely, The High Window, and The Lady in the Lake. So yeah, I will link to those chats in the details below if you're interested in checking those out, because they were also super fun reads. This book, however, does kick off with an introduction by Raymond Chandler that was is dated 1950. So he wrote this, I guess, when this collection originally came out. And the introduction was so interesting that I thought I would spend just a few minutes to talk about it before we talk a little bit about the stories. The introduction kicks off talking about pulp fiction, the pulp fiction of like the 20s and 30s, and how it was not really meant to be a lasting work, right? It was published in kind of magazines a lot of times, and it was considered somewhat disposable. And he's sort of making the case in this introduction that, there was really more to it than that. And he has there's a couple of quotes here that I pulled out that I thought I would share, just sort of describing first of all, what is hard-boiled pulp fiction, hard-boiled detective fiction from this era. And the quote says, talking about the sort of the world that these characters inhabit, it says their characters lived in a world gone wrong, a world in which, long before the atom bomb, civilization had created the machinery for its own destruction and was learning to use it with all the moronic delight of a gangster trying out his first machine gun. So they live in a really kind of a chaotic world, and at least the characters inhabit, and it's sort of maybe more of the seedy underside of what is kind of the veneer of civilization. He goes on to say, as far as the sort of the emotional basis of the hard-boiled story, he says, as to the emotional basis of the hard-boiled story, obviously it does not believe that murder will out and justice will be done unless some very determined individual makes it his business to see that justice is done. So in this world, there isn't really any goodness or justice unless someone makes it so, because the default would be injustice in this world. So I thought that was really kind of interesting. He kind of closes this introduction talking about the value of detective fiction, this pulp fiction from this era, and how it's not considered literary, and there's a certain snobbery against this sort of genre fiction. But I think he makes the case that there's really more to it, and there's definitely as far as like the literary language. It's the language of these books is really what makes them so much fun to read. And I have a couple of quotes here as examples from this particular book of just how Raymond Chandler is able to really create character and tell a story through this use of this type of language, sort of a more common, I guess, slang type language. One quote says, "It was 4:45 when I got back to the office. I had a couple of short drinks and stuffed a pipe and sat down to interview my brains." The phone rang. So, that just sets us up that, he's getting back to his office, and he's going to think about, he's going to interview himself to see if he can figure out what he's seen that day, what he's learned that day. Another quote says, the second quote I have here is, there's a character, this woman, he goes up to this woman, she starts just telling him all sorts of stuff, and he doesn't know what she's talking about. And he says, I made motions in the air. Lady, one of us has the book open at the wrong page, I grunted. I just love that. I think it's so cool. But this kind of language is sort of typical of these types of novels, and I think it's just really fun to go on this adventure solving these different crimes, and we're going to talk a little bit about that now. So the back of the book has a description that's sort of overall, and I thought I would just read that. These are detective stories, so I will be very careful about spoilers. I don't want to detract from a first-time reader's experience with these, so I definitely won't be giving away who done it. But on the back of this book, it says, in these 4 masterful stories, Philip Marlowe is hired to protect a wealthy old man from a gold digger, runs afoul of crooked politicos, gets a line on some stolen jewels with a hefty reward attached, and stumbles across a murder victim who may or may not be an extortionist. These stories represent all that fans have come to know and love about Raymond Chandler, from their crystal clear, unpretentious prose to the unpredictable breakneck plots to the atmospheric, unforgettable locales. All of that is so true. And that's kind of what I think Raymond Chandler was trying to say in the introduction as far as the value of these kinds of books. Yeah, it might not be literary prose, but this sort of prose, this unpretentious prose, this blurb describes it. I think that's it's what makes these types of books so much fun. But these stories, okay, there are 4 different stories. The first story is called Trouble Is My Business, and in this story, the description I wrote personally of my synopsis of it is a rich man hires Marlowe to investigate theoretical gold digger who seems to be after his adopted son. Matters get complicated by a murder and the woman's gambler boyfriend. So, yeah, this one was really good. I think a lot of people consider this one to be the best of the stories. I think I kind of liked the second story called Finger Man. I really liked this one. This one's about a failed casino owner hires Marlowe to watch out for him as he tries to infiltrate a rival casino owner's rigged sort of games. He's going to try to make some money. But through this rigged system, we get exposed to the sort of the seedy underside of Los Angeles politics of the era. And so that one was a lot of fun. The third story is called Goldfish. And in this one, Marlowe has a friend who hires him to help her recover stolen pearls. And matters are complicated by others also trying to find these pearls. And ultimately, greed proves to be the undoing of everybody and pretty much everybody involved in this story, or in this sort of effort around these pearls. So this story was fun too. Finally, the 4th story is called Red Wind, and in this one, Marlowe is hanging out in a local bar, minding his own business, not causing any trouble or anything, when a murder occurs. And the cast of characters in this particular, Marlowe then sets out to solve this murder. The cast of characters, though involved, include this enigmatic woman that also showed up at the bar, who has this 2-timing husband, an ex-con that's got this sort of axe to grind. There's a corrupt cop in the mix, and a double-crossing blackmailer. So, needless to say, that sounds like a lot of fun, right? It was. There are actually 2 murders in that story. So yeah, that's the sort of the brief synopsis that I would say, my version of the synopsis of the 4 stories, and I just enjoyed all 4 of them. So yeah, as I mentioned, I think the second story, Finger Man, it was my favorite of the 4, but they were all 4 of them were very entertaining, so I did enjoy those. I have at least one more of the Raymond Chandler novels yet to read, I think. So I'll have that one coming up soon, but I think I won't say anything more about Trouble Is My Business right now, just because I don't want to give away anything that would detract from anybody's experience with it. Definitely, though, the novels are a bit better because they're longer form, so we get more involved with the characters here than we can in these stories. But nevertheless, for quick, easy, sort of fun Raymond Chandler stories, this book was fun. So I will leave the chat there, and I will have another chat coming up in the near future. So until then, take care.